for tuning in today. I'm your host, Philip Dearborn, president of the Association for Biblical Higher Education. And we have what I consider rock stars as part of our podcast, Paul and Carol Alexander, a couple that I've gotten to know over the last couple of years. And Paul serves on ABHE's board of directors. And he is the president of Trinity Bible College and Graduate School in Ellendale, North Dakota. And if you don't know where Ellendale, North Dakota is, don't worry. A lot of our listeners would have no clue where Ellendale, North Dakota is. I've been there twice. And if you blink, you will miss Ellendale, North Dakota. But the thing I love about Trinity, it is right smack in this small town. And you all are just doing a phenomenal job of fulfilling God's call, not only in your lives, but also in the life of the institution. Carol also serves on the team, and she is the dean of the graduate school. And pretty exciting what Carol has been able to do over the last several months. And in fact, just celebrated several weeks ago their graduation of doctoral students. And one of the areas that she's been focused in is on a PhD. And I believe 9 graduates that you had this year. Is that right, Carol?
It is, yes.
Great. So both Paul and Carol, they've written a book, and that's going to be what we talk about. And this is a book titled Radical Obedience, The Chronicles of Two Global Pilgrims. And I've put a link to the book in the show description in case you want to go over and purchase it. But it's all around this idea of radical obedience. And like I said, I've gotten to know the two of them over the last couple of years and just have so many neat stories and examples of what it means to follow Christ and what does it actually mean to be obedient to him. And so I've invited them on the show to talk about that book, talk about some of their experiences, and how they've not allowed circumstances to get in the way of following God. So Paul and Carol, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Philip. It's a privilege to be with you.
Yes, thank you. Wonderful to be with you today, Philip. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about some of the stories. Some of them are humor, some stories. Some of them are heart stories. Tug at your heartstrings. But before we actually get into some of the content of the book and what you've written about radical obedience, what does it look like? Why did you choose to write this book? Paul, we'll start with you and then go to Carol. Why write this book?
So we find ourselves at a wonderful stage in life that we are thoroughly enjoying. We have entered the third of life, and in fact,
is that another way of saying that you're getting older? Or?
I prefer the third of life, actually.
Okay, good. We'll stick with that.
And next year we celebrate 50 years of marriage. We've lived on 4 continents around the world, and I think as you serve God openly and with passionate hearts, you accumulate stories. Things happen. Life takes place. Some of it you plan as best you can. Some you just can't plan. It comes at you in an unexpected way. But you hope, especially as you survive the stories, as you get through life, you hope you can look back over your shoulder and share stories primarily with lessons to learn. And so we wanted to chronicle some of the smaller stories, if you like, of our lives. Some of them are big, but most of them are smaller stories, all accumulating into one volume in which we describe exactly what we've given it as a title, Radical Obedience. Some of those things just wouldn't have happened if we had paused or thought too long about it. Yeah. We trusted God. We believed in his goodness. We have been great believers of his providence in living and life. And so we thought we wanted to record it. And we've concluded every chapter with what we call a prayerful pause, rather than some kind of application or 7 things that you need to do to be a better leader. We rather thought it would be better to encourage reflectiveness in the light of the story that's been shared. So it certainly doesn't cover everything. It's some of the high points, but we hope that we have given, perhaps in our language, a thorough theological or a comprehensive theological overview of what it means just to journey with God through life.
And one of the things I love about how you've written the book is, you'll write about it and then reflect on it, Paul, from your perspective, but then Carol also then from your perspective. And one of the things I love about you as a couple is you have always approached ministry as a team. This hasn't been about what Paul is doing in ministry. It's what Paul and Carol have been doing together in ministry. So, Carol, give us some. Why were you excited about writing this book?
I think as we have reflected over our lives, especially the last few years, I've seen that God's done so many amazing things in our lives, and we wanted to reflect not only on the big miracles, but on the small ones. For me, a miracle is a miracle, whether it's God supplying your need for $10 or God giving you the millions. A miracle is still a miracle. And I think we wanted to show people that miracles are miracles no matter what. And we wanted to encourage people, inspire people, and help people to understand that this journey of radical obedience is a call for every Christ follower, not just for us, but for every Christ follower.
Yeah. Isn't it neat how God in his relationship with us will take the normal everyday circumstances that we have as evidence of, one, that he's there, and two, that he's a sovereign God. And regardless of what the need is, and like how you said, $10 or $1 million, or just the strength to get through today, or an amazing opportunity to be president and dean of a college, right? So God is always there, giving us indications. One of the stories that I absolutely love, Carol, and I'd love for you to kind of recount it, is your call. I first heard this story when we were together several months ago, and you shared it in the car, and it's just an amazing story about God's call to Samoa. So why don't you tell us that story?
So one of the rhythms of our lives when we were young people traveling the world was we would stop every week and have a day of prayer and fasting. And at this particular time, we were in Hawaii, and we would go into different rooms and then come and share with each other what we felt we'd heard from God that day. And Paul came back into the room and he said to me, I just felt God so strongly say we should go to Samoa. And I said, where on earth is Samoa? And he said, I have no idea. So we went down to a library, got a map. And in those days, there were maps in the library in these old atlases. And we looked for Samoa, and we found that it was a tiny little island in the Pacific. And we thought, wow, God, what do you want us to do there? And initially I thought, what if it's a cannibal eating island? What would we do then? Would people look and go, there's some delicious looking South Africans? And so we prayed about it, and we felt God say, go to Samoa. And at that time, we were ministering with a pastor, and he said, well, I know some missionaries in Samoa. Let me give you their address and you can write to them, which we promptly did. Went down to a post office, mailed the letter.
Which let's just pause there, because a lot of our younger listeners are younger. And so you've made a couple references to going to a library and looking at an atlas and actually writing a letter, going to the post office and mailing it, where today we'd be looking on our phones. We'd Google Samoa. We know exactly where it is, and you'd send an email to them, right? I mean, it's a totally different day in how we deal with things, isn't it?
That's just a subtle way of you reminding me again that I'm old, but anyway,
no, you're in your third stage, but
third of life.
All right, Carol, keep going.
So we mailed the letter and waited for a response. A response came about a couple of weeks later from the missionary, and it was a very rude response. We were both quite taken aback, because he said, we don't want you here. We know that a lot of you young people just want to come to our beautiful island for a free vacation. And we were so taken aback. We, at that stage, were doing a lot of children's ministry. I had a ventriloquial doll, and so we had a lot of fun. We were ministering to children and young people around the world. We felt discouraged, and we said, okay, they don't want us, we won't go. And we felt God say, but I've asked you to go. And that's where that radical obedience comes in. Do you listen to God? Do you listen to man? What do you do? And so we prayed about it again and took the huge step of faith, took all our money and booked tickets to Samoa. Soon as I got on the plane, I thought, oh, what have we done. I think that's where, our humanity kicks in at times.
Yeah.
And there is sometimes you deal with fear. Have I done the right thing? And I began to pray what I thought was, from this perspective, a very silly prayer. But I said, God, please send us a Christian taxi driver and let him allow us to sleep in his car, because nobody knows we're coming. Nobody knows we're going to be there. And this is terrifying.
And we were arriving at 2 a.m. in the morning.
We got off the plane, and there were some Samoan dancers greeting us off the plane. And Paul saw a bus. He said, go towards the bus. And we started to walk towards the bus. And I looked over my right shoulder and I saw a couple standing there. And something about that couple just witnessed with my spirit. That's all I can say. And we put our cases down. Paul said, get on the bus. And I said to him, did you see that couple? He said, yes. I said, I think they're Christians. He said, well, that's lovely. I said, please go and ask them who they're waiting for. He said, love, nobody knows we're here. I said, just go and ask them. If you make a fool of yourself, what does it matter? You'll never see them again. So just go and ask them. So he listened to me and he went and he asked them and said, excuse me, who are you waiting for? They said, we're waiting for Paul and Carol Alexander. At that point, he nearly died. He said, who? Yeah. And they repeated, Paul and Carol Alexander. He said, that's us, that's us. They said, oh, we didn't think you'd look like that. I think they thought maybe we were from South Africa, we would be dark-skinned, whatever they thought. And so we grabbed our suitcases, got on into a vehicle, and they took us to their home address. They said, you go off and sleep now. We said, we can't sleep. You have to tell us why you were there to meet us. And there were a young couple from 𝗬𝗲, and the pastor of the the superintendent of the Congregational Church had come to them a few months prior to this event and said, do you know anyone that can do children's and youth work? And they said, we really, really don't. And they felt so disappointed because he was opening up all his churches on the island for a youth worker and a children's worker. And they were very disappointed. They were at the post office that day, and a missionary was walking down the step with a letter in his hand, and he was very irate. They'd known him kind of by sight, and he was just saying, oh, Paul and Carol Alexander, youth and children's work, don't know who they think they are, and spouting all this anger about a couple he didn't even know. And as they heard it, they got into their car and they said, you know, we think that that's our couple. And God said to them, it is your couple, and they will be on this plane. They will arrive at 2:00 in the morning on this date. Go out to meet them. And that was absolutely a God connection and absolute radical obedience. And God did some amazing things on the island in those couple of weeks that we were there.
Wow. Did you stay in contact with that couple?
We did. We stayed in contact with them for many, many years. An amazing couple. Their names were 𝗵𝘗𝘗 and 𝗧𝗵𝘂𝘀𝘀. An amazing couple.
We didn't sustain much contact with the 𝗬𝗲 couple. They literally dropped us off, and we moved into the home with the elderly superintendent and his wife. And it's a whole story all of its own. We had children's meetings early each morning and every afternoon, and then they opened up churches all across the island. We never did meet the irate missionary, by the way.
Probably still there, grumbling about Paul and Carol Alexander, right? Can't believe this.
Waving his letter in the air. Yeah.
Yeah, but thank you for sharing that. It's such a great story and small example of many stories that you tell in the book of just that radical obedience of taking that step and knowing that God has called you to something, and that regardless of circumstance, actually stepping out. So, Paul, with the subject of obedience, I think it's a bit of a countercultural concept. We know it to be a biblical and theological issue. I mean, we see the ultimate example of obedience when Christ died on the cross and it was the Father's will. So it's definitely part of who we are in our theology and understanding of how God works. But why is it so difficult for us as human beings to practice radical obedience?
I think that's a textured response is probably the best way to come at it. I think in our humanity, we obviously follow the impulses of our lives. That's got a whole lot to do with nature and nurture and background and family. And especially those of us out of a very strong sort of Protestant, quite reformed position. We believe in a strong work ethic. We've been raised to make plans and to do what's right and to store up during the summer what we need in the winter. These have been the rhythms of family life and cultural life for a very long time. And so stepping into the unknown, stepping out into the uncertain, doesn't come naturally to us in our cultural background. And by the way, I don't think that's unique to us in our culture. I think it's quite human. We much prefer the safety of the known, the secure, and so it is not just countercultural, it's counter our fundamental humanity. We love seed time and harvest, and it's the way that we've been raised. So that's the first issue I think that we have to confront in obedience. I think the second one is definitely very much a kind of a theological and maybe even an ecclesial one. We come from different kind of church backgrounds. My grandparents were Scots, so I grew up in a good Presbyterian church. Understood, I thought, a lot about the sovereignty of God. And so you would have on one extreme that very strong commitment to this is God's sovereignty, let the will of God be done. And then, of course, sometimes flowing into the vacuum on the other side, we have had church traditions and perhaps more so preachers who have really stressed the mystical, the miraculous. And sadly, in a way, neither extreme really works in the long term. They both run out of steam somewhere along the line. And so it's probably true that a large number of Christians they walk cautiously through life because they want to please God, they want to be obedient, but they don't want to make mistakes. And I think the advantage that Carol and I had was that we just started so young. We fell in love as teenagers. We went to Bible college together. We married. People said, how did you do it? Well, we had nothing to lose. All of our possessions could be put in a suitcase, basically. So we are very empathetic when it comes to people putting their feet in the water, hoping that the waters might part, but really unsure whether they will. And I think that's entirely human, entirely legitimate. But at the same time, for those of us who have walked a journey and proved God's faithfulness, I think it's incumbent upon us to inspire people to obedience, to committed followership of Jesus. And I think ultimately that might be one of the primary motivations for our book.
Yeah. Almost like a spiritual discipline of practicing obedience, that it's and the fact that you started early on in life and following God and obeying him and his call started in the small things. And then as you were able to navigate through life and the circumstances to continue to obey him, even to this day, right? If God suddenly, you're thinking you're going this trajectory, and if he suddenly takes you off into a different direction, you're conditioned to respond in obedience rather than objection to what God's will is.
That's not tough for us anymore. It's a little bit like physical fitness. I think you build up the muscle mass, and I think you build this. My favorite word at the moment is you build resilience. It's that ability to adapt quickly, to respond openly, and to believe passionately for the best. So I would add that I spoke in an ordination service just this time last week, and one of the deep convictions of my life is that especially Christian leaders, but all Christ followers, we do have what I call an eschatological hope. The Lord is in control. He does all things well. His gift to us is love and kindness. He tempts no man with evil, the Bible tells us. And so there ought to be a disposition about us that absolutely reflects that. I believe in God. I believe in His grace and His goodness. I believe that I shall see my Redeemer stand upon the earth in the latter day. These optimistic, passionate convictions that God is in control.
Now, Carol, I think sometimes we take that reality, the biblical truths that we know, and we take verses like God is working everything together for our good, and we say, well, therefore, if I obey, like it's this transaction that if I do X, then God is on the hook to do Y for me, and that Y becomes an easy life, money, fame, fill in the blank. Like if I obey, okay, so if I choose to do this, God is going to bless me, and that blessing is only good for me. Dispel that for us. What is it that actually radical obedience actually provides for us as Christ followers?
You know, one of the verses that have become really meaningful in our lives is that verse in Proverbs that says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight. And I think obedience requires that absolute trust. And it hasn't always been an easy lesson. I have to say that there have been times I've kicked against the prods and promptings of God, said, why, Lord? No, Lord, I don't want to, Lord. And yet I found that in that place of trust, where I'm not using my own mind to try and figure out what you're doing, why you're doing it, because bad things happen to good people. That's just part of being alive, whether we're Christians or not. We live in a broken world, and bad things happen to good people. And we've experienced that. We've experienced those bad things. Our son was in a terrible accident. We experienced incredible trauma and grief, but God saw us through that period and that time. And I just think, once again, it's this whole idea of absolute and total trust in God. And it's taken years for me to get to that place, to lean on Jesus, to get to that place when I'm at the end of myself and I do not know what to do, say, God, you know best. Even in my wildest dreams, I cannot figure out how you are going to supply the need or how you are going to answer this prayer, but you know best. And I think it's that place of absolute trust. I think that's what radical obedience requires more than anything else, is a heart of trust in a very good and wonderful God.
Yeah. Would you say that one of the things that we get, the best way that I can describe it in my own personal life is when I am obeying God, He promises us peace, that regardless of whatever's happening or the consequences of being obedient, He through the power of the Spirit provides us peace.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would add to that, the promise of Scripture, and He will add all things to you. I think obedience is the reward. I think trust is in itself. It's not the outcome. It's not the money. It's not the result. It's not whatever wonderful door might open to you. Whether it's an avaricious expression of our lives or just simply wanting daily bread, I really think that the reward itself is that life of faith in which the peace of God passes all understanding. And all these things are then added, but whether they're added or not, the whole Philippians thought, I know what it is to have much, I know what it is to have little, and yet in all of this, Paul says, I'm satisfied, I'm at peace, and I think that's probably the joy of this reflective process in our lives, is that we don't have to strive for anything really. We simply have to live obediently.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, we have a few minutes left here, and closing question, and I'm going to ask this of each of you. We'll start with you, Carol. We have, a lot of younger listeners who are perhaps in their first, what did you say? First turn? First
third.
Their first third of life. I bet you when you reflect back to even the Samoa story, where you were just fresh and green right out of Bible college and ministry, and you just stepped in. And so it probably just feels like yesterday that happened, but you've lived an entire lifetime of experiences of this radical obedience. So to those people who are younger in that position, almost ready to hear that call to go to Samoa or go wherever, fill in the blank, what's a word of advice that you would give to them at this point of their journeys?
I just think that the safest place we can ever find ourselves is in the will of God. And so some people say, God, why would you take me to Africa? It's war-torn. There's poverty. But if it's in the will of God, it's going to be the very safest place for you. I know when we came to Ellendale, North Dakota, I said, God, why Ellendale, this tiny little community? And I actually pushed first. I said, God, you wouldn't want us here. You wouldn't have brought us to a place like this after leading a college in the middle of Europe and a thriving work there. Why would we come here? And yet, I'm in the happiest place of my whole life because it's in the middle of God's will. Would I have chosen this location from a natural perspective? Absolutely not. Would I have chosen North Dakota as a state to serve in? Absolutely not. But at the end of it, I can honestly say that yielding to my God's will is the very, very best thing for my life. And that would be my encouragement to young leaders. Radical obedience is really the only option for our lives, and to submit to the will of our God is the very, very best and safest thing we can ever do.
Yeah. And I've experienced this, and I think you would agree with it, because when you step out in radical obedience, I believe that God does provide those windows of opportunity for you to reflect back and say, oh, I get it now. I can understand why you took me through these journeys to come to this point. It doesn't always happen. And it doesn't happen in every instance, but I know for me personally, and that encourages me through those tough times of, did I make the right decision? And was it really your voice that we heard? He brings you to these points to be like, oh, okay, I get it now. And there's a certain sense of peace and satisfaction that comes at that point of recognizing, God, I'm so glad that you're in control, that I'm not in control, and I can see how you are working. And yes, I might have questioned Ellendale, North Dakota, but now that I'm here, wow, God, we've got a thriving PhD program with graduates from literally around the world who are making an impact for the cause of Christ. And those pieces now have come together for you. Amen. How about Paul? How would you respond to that question? What's a word of advice you'd give to younger leaders?
I think you can never do better than just fulfilling a daily rhythm of service and obedience and submission. You don't have to pray and fast and put yourself through extraordinary spiritual exercises to discover the will of God. You just have to get up with a willing heart.
Yeah.
And I think if Carol and I can reflect back at all, it's how grateful we've been that in the midst of this global pilgrimage that's taken us to 4 continents, given us extraordinary experiences, brought the most amazing people across our lives, and sometimes some pretty nasty people across our lives too. In it all, we are able to every day say, this is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice. And then when those days accumulate into seasons, you're able to look back and say, that was the Lord's doing. Yeah. And it's marvelous in our eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to me, it's not looking for the opportunity of obedience with sort of antenna up and wide eyes. It's living today. It's just getting up. Yeah. It's fulfilling the fundamental disciplines of life, being kind to people, doing justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. Yes. And then the opportunities arise. And when you reflect, say, wow, I didn't know I had it in me, but look how good God has been.
That's such a great perspective. So many of us in our younger years have been in this passive position of, okay, Lord, show me your will. Well, he hasn't shown me yet. So, and then, okay, Lord, what is it that you want me to do? And your advice is just do it. There are opportunities to be faithful to God's call right in front of you today,
Absolutely.
Getting up and fulfilling what he has for you today. And I believe in his economy of how he works, it's be faithful in those things. And then I will provide greater opportunities, from your perspective, greater opportunities for you to practice radical
obedience. We would say a loud
obedience.
amen to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Yes.
Well, this has been a phenomenal conversation. To both of you, Paul and Carol, I really appreciate you. And thank you for coming on the show and sharing some of your perspectives.
Thank you,
It's been a
Philip.
great privilege. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And in our show description, you'll see a link there to their book titled Radical Obedience, Chronicles of Two Global Pilgrims. And we'll also put a link there to their school, Trinity Bible College and Graduate School, so you can find out more of what God is doing through them there in Ellendale, North Dakota. So until next time, stay kingdom focused.
The Biblical Higher Ed Talk podcast is proud to be a part of the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast Network. Discover even more conversations, resources, and tools to help you grow your institution at thehigheredmarketer.com, your go-to community for all things higher ed marketing and leadership.